Hi, Ali here, and let's look at XML and allied technologies in this video, with XML being the basic building block of web development, the ABC of web language. While XML is not exactly something to do with web development, it is the language that you learn to be able to write documents for the web using HTML. That makes XML so powerful, in addition to it being a great technology in itself. So, what is XML? It is short for Extensible Markup Language, and it was originally designed to store and transport data. It is a text-based format, and its greatest quality being that it is understandable by both humans and machines. It is standardized via open standards, and driving goal is simplicity, generality, and usability across Internet. Before we dive into its syntax, let's do a little mental exercise. Let's say your mom, tired of dad asking where his things are in the house all the time, assigns you the task of organizing things in the house in a text file, which can be read and understood by everyone at your home. I know there are better ways to do that, but just cut me some slack for trying to come up with a good example. Alright, so if you are for some reason constrained to just use a text file, what would the text file look like? You're welcome to pause and think, or just listen ahead. So house is like a tree structure. It is a facility which is organized into rooms. Rooms have types, qualities, or attributes describing their role, like garage, bedroom, bathroom, TV room, kitchen, etc. In each room, there are items and containers containing other items like cupboards, storage boxes, drawers. In short, there is a hierarchy or tree-like organization in house, and you are trying to put the tree definition in a text file. Unless you're a genius who can come up with something totally unique, most people would resort to using a markup and content strategy, where they would indicate starting and end of a container, such as room, with a markup, or you can say some sort of starting and end markers. And contained within the markup would be content, which can itself be markup or markups and other content. Now, simply put, this intuitive way of representing a hierarchy within a text file created in Notepad is called XML. There is no rocket science here. All right, no rocket science. Wait until we are done with the formal definition of XML. So please tolerate this slide, and I assure you things would start making sense from the next. So formally, characters making up an XML document are divided into markup and content, which may be distinguished by the application of simple syntactic rules. If you create the home text file using XML rules, the resulting file would be known as XML document. Logically, the document is composed of declarations, elements, comments, character references, and processing instructions, all of which are indicated in the document by explicit markup. Now, bear with me for these rules or XML document, and rest assured, again, I'll explain everything once the formal stuff making sense to you. So a text file is a valid XML document if it contains one or more elements. The topmost element is called the root or document element. For all other elements, if start tag is in content of another element, the end tag is in the content of the same element. More simply stated, the elements delimited by start and end tags nest properly within each other. You must be wondering, what does this all mean? Well, let's return to plain English now and understand elements and tags better. So you might have understood elements are the basic building blocks of XML. They consist of three parts. A start tag, which looks like tag name enclosed in left and right arrows, like section or kitchen. Content, such as I'm content of section element. And lastly, the end tag indicating end of element. Same as start tag, but with a forward slash after the left arrow. Another example closer to home element from the text file you created, and this is a complete element now. Home tag, this is my home where I eat, sleep, and sometimes work, followed by the end tag. This home element example is a perfectly valid XML document where home element is a root element describing your home. This document contains only one element. Right, we use the word tags, so let's explore tags a little bit more. Each element has a start and end tag. The opening tag of an element is written between left arrow or less than sign or right arrow or greater than sign. The ending tag in comparison is written between left arrow followed by a forward slash sign. and lastly the right arrow sign. Data between starting and end tags of an element are its contents. Do note that tags are always case sensitive. I hope you understand what elements are, and we are halfway through being functional with XML if you got that far. An XML document contains a hierarchy of elements, which means content of an element can be other elements. The topmost element is called the root element and contains all other elements, which are called child elements. Here we have a more detailed example of what an element with nested hierarchy looks like. As you can see, both single line and multi-line home elements are perfectly valid XML. You can pause and look closely at the example, and I'll explain it further in the next slide. In our example, the home element is the root element, and there's only one root element in XML. It is also a parent element having two child elements, garage and kitchen, and also its own text content. In other words, its content is composed of two child elements and a description. As for terminology, the home element is not only the root element, it is also the parent element for garage and kitchen elements. Conversely, garage and kitchen elements are children or child elements of home element. Garage and kitchen also are siblings of each other since they share a common parent. Except for the root part, which is reserved for top level element, all the other rules remain the same for all elements in XML. This means kitchen can have its own hierarchy where it would be the parent element of its child element, like stove or microwave elements. Do you remember the rule and formal definition which said start and end tags must be in the same element? It means the element in its entirety must fit within content of its parent element content, that is between its starting and end tags, and it must not overlap with any of its siblings. Below is an example of invalid XML as starting tag of kitchen is in content of garage, which is not allowed. So repeating, this is example of an invalid XML. Also note that content of an element is optional, but start and end tags are not. So kitchen/kitchen is a perfectly valid XML, and such elements are called empty elements. Let's now talk about another extremely important concept in XML called attributes. Attributes are like adjectives for the elements, that is, they describe the element or provide information about the elements, a sort of metadata about elements, you can say. As it probably makes sense, they are set on the element in the start tag and start tag only as name value pairs. Before going further, an example would be good. So have a look at the movie element. Here, genre, rating, and language are attributes of a movie being represented by the movie element, and they are all defined as name value pairs in the start tag. Note the double quotation marks as they are strictly necessary. As you might have guessed by earlier content, they are strictly optional and can only appear once within an element. Another less talked about but very important feature of XML, particularly in context of web development, are entities. Entities are escape characters or placeholders for reserved words of XML. A horrible choice of word, I must say, as entity intuitively means something concrete, and better word would be escaping. But oh well, let's move on with it. As an example, the less than and greater than characters are reserved characters for XML. So if your content contains these characters, say for example you are making an XML about maths and some equation containing less than, greater than, or ampersand appears in content, it would mess up the XML. Not too big of an issue for you or a human maybe since they use common sense, but for non-human readers like XML parsers, they are a big deal. So you need to store them a bit differently in XML file form. To get around that problem, there are 5 predefined entities, and note the semicolon is mandatory. So ampersand LT semicolon represents the left arrow or less than sign. Ampersand GT semicolon represents the greater than sign. Ampersand AMP semicolon represents ampersand. And ampersand APOS represents a single quote, and ampersand quote represents double quote. Note that these 5 entities are defined as at XML level. If you are evaluating XML in context of web development, note that HTML, which is made up of XML, has a ton of more escape characters for all kind of stuff like $sign, up, down arrows, colons, asterisks, Latin characters, and whatnot. I won't go over that list here, but you can Google HTML entity reference list to know about these. Lastly, Do remember the purpose of entities is to avoid confusion regarding what XML syntax is compared to content. Again, coming up with an example. So he said, I think 5 greater than 2 is the correct answer. Translates to, well, you can read it, I won't. Comments are another useful feature, and if you have ever done any coding, its importance is hard to ignore. Sometimes you want to add comments to XML, but don't want the parsers to read it as part of XML. Luckily, since prevailed, an XML standard has support for proper comment sections via special tags. These are start tag as left arrow, exclamation dash dash, and end tag as dash dash right arrow. Anything in between would be considered a comment. Note that comments cannot appear within XML markup itself, that is, you can't have comments in a tag. Furthermore, since content of comments are totally ignored by parsers, the rules of XML do not apply to what can appear in content of comment. Finally, we have perfectly valid example of a comment in which you can clearly see we are using arrows and ampersand signs and all, and this is totally valid. You would surely come across CDATA sections in XML if you work with it. It is a piece of element content that is marked up to be interpreted literally as textual data, not as marked up content. In other words, the content of CDATA can be interpreted as XML, but it should not be. This is useful if you are saving draft of an article about XML containing numerous examples of XML usage as XML. How is it different from comment, you might ask? Again, emphasizing comment is not part of XML while CDATA is. So I have provided an example here. As you read in the example, you can use whatever you like in CDATA except its ending tag, which would result in error. There is no escape character for this, so the only remedy is to close the CDATA section at this point, use the double square bracket closing as text content, and then start another CDATA section. Right, XML is supposed to be read by both humans and non-humans. For non-humans, you can include processing instructions which are used to pass information to applications which use this information to execute special tasks. The syntax used is left arrow question question. For example, XML version 1.0 encoding UTF-8. Here information for XML parser includes the version and encoding of that XML document. From web development perspective, a good example would be directive XML style sheet. This lets the parser know that there exists a style sheet for this XML document, and while showing it in a browser, the XML content should be shown as per styling given in the style sheet file. Just something to be aware of at this stage that this is possible. You have the example provided for the style sheet syntax. You guys need to either look up XSLT and XML style sheets yourself or express interest via comments if you would like me to make a video on the topic. Basically, style sheets allow rendering an XML like a web page where you can style each element individually, like XML would be rendered as a table, where a room's row would be a light blue background, and each item would be rendered as a bullet list. You can sort items, conditionally show or hide elements, and even add or remove elements and attributes. This is a very powerful feature called Extensible Style Sheet Language Transformations, or short XSLT. Do note that XML itself is not supposed to contain any styling information and is primarily a data store. However, styling information can be augmented via style sheets to do it robustly. I'll stop here on that topic. I would not conclude coverage of XML without mentioning the exciting feature of XML schema or XSDs, also known as XML schema definitions. They are kind of a type definition of XML, enforcing constraints on what the XML must look like. Here's an example for you to see how an XSD looks like. Sadly, we cannot go in details of XSD beyond this point in the video as this is a whole new topic. Do let me know via comments though if you would like me to make a video for that. For now, being aware of the options existing is enough. Another associated concept is XML validations, which take your XML along with an XSD or DTD, which stands for document type definitions, and validate that XML is well formed, that is, follows all rules of XML as well as your data type definitions or XML schema. Any errors are identified and highlighted. Really cool feature to ensure your data is correctly stored as XML. Then there are XPath and XQuery concepts. As I mentioned, XML files allow you to store data in text form, readable by both humans and machines. So far, we have seen how to create XML properly, but once an XML is created, The purpose is to be able to read and consume that data efficiently. XPath and XQuery are to XML as SQL is to database. They allow you to query data from XML in various forms. Examples are worth a few hundred words at least. So let's look at XPath expressions below. As you can see, there are multiple ways of querying data. For example, if we look at the second example, slash home slash room position less than 3, it selects the first two room elements that are children of home element. Then the next one, home room color equal to blue, selects all room which have blue paint attribute. And lastly, home slash room color equal to blue slash cupboard selects all cupboard elements of the room element with blue paint of the room. Pretty cool, right? You can query XML in all sort of ways, and we just gave a few beginner examples only. Right, XQuery is even more powerful. Just have a look at this example. Pretty self-explanatory and amazingly powerful, right? Note XQuery uses XPath under the hood. XML has been around for a while, and before JSON, it was kind of a de facto standard for data transmission as well. No wonder there are so many cool features built around it. Since we can do all this stuff with XPath and XQuery, another related concept is XML Document Object Model and its successor HTML Document Object Model. Both allow an XML document to be parsed into an object and manipulated and queried via object syntax in languages like JavaScript. There are standards to get, change, add, and delete XML and HTML elements. And it is easy as XML is accessible via properties and methods. If you haven't worked with JavaScript objects yet, no worries. You most probably will rub by Document Object Model or DOM at some stage, and I will be creating a dedicated video on DOM anyway, which depending on when you are watching might already be available. Or you can subscribe to be notified otherwise. I would hope you subscribe anyway though. Since an XML can be parsed into DOM, the next inevitable concept is XML parser, which makes it happen. Yes, XML parser comes into play before DOM, but since it creates the DOM, we can't discuss it before DOM, right? Anyway, the job of parser is to read the XML in text form, interpret it like identify elements, attributes, and their relationships, and then create an in-memory object called DOM from that information, allowing you, the user, to manipulate it much more conveniently than manipulating a regular text file through code. All major browsers have built-in XML parsers for that reason. This brings us to end of discussion on XML. If you feel fuzzy with so much terminology, it's probably okay. My intention was to generally introduce you to XML in detail, but also scratch the surface of its usage ecosystem. Even having an idea about what is possible is useful when you are presented with a challenging usage situation where you can explore more on the topic and find the most efficient way to solve the problem instead of crafting your own solution. Hope you liked the video. If so, do consider giving it a thumbs up and subscribing to channel to see more content like this one. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.